I'm Ava Monroe, 16 years old. And that stormy night? I died once. Not physically, but something far more vital, my belief in family. The car sliced through the rain like a blind arrow, windshield wipers groaning against the downpour. I sat in the back seat, curled up like a drenched cat, my thin arms wrapped around a battered old backpack. I didn't even realize they had packed it for me until I saw it there. I asked, "Mom, where are we going? The hospital closes after 8. No answer. My dad's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel, and my mom stared dead ahead like I didn't exist. I knew something was wrong. I didn't need painkillers or a doctor to feel it. The chill rolling off them was worse than the fever gnawing at my spine. I was born in Oregon into a family that once seemed kind. My illness started when I was 11, just some hand tremors when typing or walking long distances. The doctor said it might be rapid growth or a vitamin deficiency. But it got worse. By 13, I needed a cane. By 15, I was more familiar with the smell of disinfectant than anything cooking in Mom's kitchen. My parents used to care. Once, my dad even carried me up 2 flights of stairs when the hospital elevator was broken. But compassion seemed to have an expiration date. As the bills piled up, their eyes changed. I became subtraction in a budget, a problem with no solution. "Are we close?" I asked again, trying to sound calm. This time, my dad spoke without looking back. Almost. But the road ahead wasn't leading to any hospital. It was a narrow dirt path, surrounded by forest and thick darkness. No streetlights, no houses, no cell service. Just the crunch of tires on wet ground and the roar of rain pounding the roof. The car stopped suddenly. I lurched forward. The headlights lit up a void of mist and trees like some bottomless pit. Dad turned off the engine. Silence, except for rain and the thud of my own heart. "Get out," he said. I laughed nervously. "You're kidding, right? It's pouring." "Get out, Ava," Mom cut in. Her voice was flat. For the first time, I saw her eyes. Empty, cold. Not the woman who once held my hand through seizures. A stranger. "Why?" My voice cracked. "I'm your daughter." "There's nothing left to give, Ava," Mom said. "We sold the second car, begged from the church. No one will help us anymore." Dad stepped out. A moment later, the rear door flew open. Wind and rain slapped my face. "Dad, no. Please." He grabbed my arm and yanked me out. My weak legs couldn't hold me. I collapsed onto the soaked grass, mud and rain soaking through my clothes like needles on skin. He tossed the backpack beside me. "There's meds, a poncho, and some food in there. Figure it out." I looked up at them. 2 people who once cried over my pain. Now they stood like strangers. No goodbye. No soft glance. Just a slammed car door, a growling engine, and taillights fading into the rain. I called out. No one looked back. I dragged myself up on my elbows, shaking, my lip bleeding from hitting a rock. I didn't know what scared me more, the cold and dark, or the truth that they wouldn't return. Curled up by the flooded roadside, I was numb. Wind lashed my face, rain cut my skin. I tried to sit up, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. My body shook, maybe from cold, maybe pain, maybe betrayal. Everything blurred, trees, rain, and the red lights that were long gone. Just me, and a whisper in my head. "This isn't a dream." I reached for the backpack. The zipper was jammed with water. The granola bar inside was soaked in mud, indistinguishable from the earth. I didn't cry. There were no tears left. Then something shifted. A sudden light, not lightning. Headlights. A truck. Old and dented. I raised my hand on instinct, but it only lifted a few inches before dropping into the mud. My heartbeat raced. I couldn't shout. My voice had disappeared with my last plea to not be left behind. The truck slowed, then stopped. Footsteps splashed closer. I turned, face smeared with grit and rain. A tall figure appeared, brown coat soaked, hood pulled low. "Anyone there?" A deep voice, raspy like someone who'd lived in the cold too long. I tried to whisper, I'm here." He ran over. I heard fabric rustle as he knelt beside me. A hand brushed wet hair from my face, then froze, as if touching something impossible. Oh my God. "Ava?" The name escaped like a breath of heartbreak. I forced my eyes open. The truck's beam hit his face sideways. I couldn't believe it. My brother. I never thought I'd see him again after 8 years of silence. Ethan had once been the golden child, smart, athletic, adored. But he was also the only one who ever challenged our parents, who dared to speak up about my illness. After a fierce argument when I was 8, he vanished. Mom said he left out of selfishness. Dad never mentioned him again. I used to believe that. Until now. Ethan lifted me from the ground like I weighed less than a child. The scent of rain mixed with pine from his coat made my head spin. "You're going to be okay," he said, voice shaking with fury. "You'll be all right, Ava. I promise." I wanted to ask, to say so many things, but the pain radiating from my spine dragged me into a warm, hazy void. When I woke up, daylight had softened the sky. I was lying in a small bed, wrapped tightly in 2 thick blankets. The faint smell of burning wood and a hint of cinnamon hung in the air. A simple wooden room, clean and strangely peaceful. Clinking sounds came from the kitchen. I turned my head slowly, neck still aching. Ethan stood there, back turned, setting a kettle on the stove. "You're awake," he said without turning. I gave a faint nod, dizziness still clouding my head. "What happened?" I rasped. Ethan turned. In his eyes, I saw anger, worry, and something that looked like regret, long buried. "I followed them," he said. "I'd been suspicious for weeks, ever since I saw they emptied your health account without telling anyone. But I didn't think they'd actually do this." He sat on the edge of the bed, eyes heavy. "I once promised I wouldn't let you go through one more day of pain, but I came too late." I didn't know how to respond. The pain, the betrayal, and now the sudden return of a brother I thought was gone. Everything tangled in my mind like a knotted string. "Did you ever try to find me?" I asked. He froze, then slowly nodded. My eyes landed on his soaked coat hanging near the door. Dry mud still clung to its hem. Even though my body still ached, something inside me began to shift. I sat on a wooden chair by the fire, a warm cup of tea in my hands, though my mind was cold and numb. Outside, snow had started to fall, thin flakes settling on the tall pines. Ethan added logs to the fire, then sat across from me, hesitant. "You have the right to know," he said, fingers laced tightly. "There are things I've carried far too long." I gripped the mug handle. "Then say it. I'm not 8 anymore." He let out a long breath, as if exhaling a decade of weight. But I wasn't kicked out for being rebellious, not for school or friends. That night, Mom and Dad fought over you. You had just been officially diagnosed, and a neurologist in Seattle urged us to take you to a center in Boston for deeper evaluation. I remembered that night. Mom held me for hours. But by morning, Ethan was gone. "I'd spent the summer working at the auto shop in town," he said. "Saved nearly $2,000. Not much, but enough for airfare and temporary expenses if they agreed. But they refused. Said Boston was too far and too expensive. I lost it. Told them they were being irresponsible. Said if they wouldn't take you, I would." "And Dad kicked you out?" I whispered. Ethan nodded. He said, "If you walk out that door for her, don't ever come back." The air in the cabin thickened. I didn't know what to say. For 10 years, I had imagined hundreds of reasons why Ethan left, but never this. After that, he continued, I lived rough. Day labor at northern farms, slept in my truck, survived on instant noodles. But I never stopped keeping track of you. I looked up, surprised. I had a friend at the local health office. She helped me get updates whenever you were admitted. And 3 years ago, things got weird. Your fundraiser account suddenly shut down. Rumors spread that Mom and Dad sold the car, drained the medical fund. I went silent. I thought, they used it for my hospital bills. Ethan shook his head. I started digging, and what I found, he pulled out an old laptop from the cabinet near the fireplace, opened a folder labeled, For Ava, and turned the screen toward me. These are statements from your public health fund. Every month, money was withdrawn, not for treatment, but transferred to Mom and Dad's personal account. I stared at the numbers, each transaction clear, thousands of dollars, vanishing, month after month. And this, Ethan clicked on a PDF file, a contract. What is it? I asked. A signed agreement from when you were 3. Mom used her maiden name to hide her identity. They signed with a pharmaceutical company called Intralexis to enroll you in a special clinical trial. In exchange, they received $80,000 upfront and $5,000 every quarter if they maintained medical compliance. My heartbeat slowed, like my body was shielding itself from a truth too devastating. I found the contract in an old storage unit in Salem. Your name, birth date, patient ID? Everything matches. So, my illness wasn't genetic? My voice broke inside the cabin. Ethan paused, then said quietly, We don't know yet, but according to the records, the drug they used on you wasn't FDA approved. It was an experimental neurological modifier. I felt the teacup slip from my fingers. Childhood memories, routine tests, medication that left me dazed, appointments I never understood, suddenly rearranged themselves with a horrifying clarity. Why would they do that? I asked. Ethan looked at me for a long time before answering. Money, Ava. For a better life. And when the consequences couldn't be hidden anymore, they chose to leave you behind. I turned away. Not from shame, but because I didn't want him to see the collapse in my eyes. From far away, the soft sound of falling snow whispered a truth I could no longer ignore. The past might be buried, but it never stays dead forever. That night, while Ethan had drifted off on the sofa near the fireplace, I lay awake, restless. My mind kept circling the numbers on the contract he showed me, the withdrawal logs, and those strange dates that aligned eerily with my medical episodes. I turned on my phone's flashlight and quietly opened the wooden desk drawer where Ethan kept old files. Among the stiff, time-worn papers, I found a thin, dark leather notebook without a name. The spine had a small tear, like it had been yanked from someone's hands in a hurry. When I opened the first page, I knew exactly what I was holding. My mother's handwriting. That familiar slant had once penned Christmas cards, lunchbox notes, and now, scattered across these yellowed pages, it revealed someone I no longer recognized. April 12, 2012. They transferred the first payment, $25,000 up front, the rest quarterly. Robert said we had no other choice. I don't even know what I'm signing anymore. But the doctor said there's no major risk. Ava's too young to understand. I clenched the notebook so tightly my knuckles went white. September 3, 2013. Ava's starting to show odd signs, shaky hands, forgetfulness. The doctor says it's normal, even good. The drug is reaching deeper. But I'm not sure. She asked why her nose bled in the middle of the night. I told her it was dry air. I lied. I paused and swallowed hard. My eyes stung. Not from anger, but from the realization that I never had a choice. What I thought was treatment was, in truth, a string of experiments, hidden behind carefully crafted lies. June 17, 2015. Robert wants Ava in the next trial. Higher doses. I said no, but he said, if she's healthy, who's gonna pay off the mortgage? They promised double the money. I said yes. I don't know if anything can be undone anymore. I remembered that time clearly. I'd vomit after each dose, wake up dizzy, unable to recall dinner the night before. But I believed it was all part of getting better. January 9th, 2022. Ava's not responding to the meds anymore. The seizures last longer, her vision's fading, her memories slipping. The fund is almost gone. They refuse to renew the contract. Robert says I have to choose, keep a fading child or keep the future of our family. I lingered before turning to the final page. February 22, 2023. Robert staged everything. The backpack was packed. He said all we had to do was leave her by the roadside and call the police, say she ran away after an argument. He said, she's too weak. No one will believe she got far. I have no tears left, but I didn't stop him. Forecast says it'll rain today. I closed the journal, my hand trembling. Outside the cabin, the wind roared through the pine trees as if it were tearing the world apart. But inside me, the real storm had already passed. What remained wasn't grief over losing my mother, but the emptiness that came from realizing she was never truly mine to begin with. When Ethan woke up, I handed him the journal. I said nothing. He flipped through a few pages and looked at me for a long time. Without speaking, I knew he felt what I did. The truth doesn't redeem, but it's where justice begins. 3 days after reading the journal, I began training. Not to heal, at least not yet, but to fight. Ethan called in an old friend to help. Camila Reyes, a former military medic who served at an Air Force base in New Mexico. She was in her mid-30s, tall, deep-voiced, with eyes as sharp as a scalpel. Consider me the hardest person you'll ever work with, she said on day 1, but I won't leave you behind. We started with simple moves, lifting arms, balancing, learning how to breathe correctly. Camila didn't believe in hollow encouragements, but whenever I collapsed in pain, she stayed beside me in silence, her hand resting on my shoulder until I was ready to continue. Days were for physical therapy, nights were for evidence. Ethan brought me into a small room behind the cabin where he stored all sensitive documents, an old but secure computer, encrypted hard drives, and cameras installed around the house. We worked for hours, cross-checking receipts, mapping money trails, listing every doctor involved in my treatment, and connecting them to Nexivel Pharmaceuticals, the new name for Intralexis after 3 rebrands to avoid media scrutiny. I found someone, Ethan said one early spring evening, just after I managed to stand without my cane. Dr. Meredith Shaw, former lead researcher at Intralexis. She disappeared from the field 7 years ago. No scandal, no resignation letter, just vanished. I looked up. Where is she now? Teaching psychology at a small college in Spokane, Washington. Still uses her real name, but she keeps a very low profile. No social media, no listed address. Camila nodded. People like that aren't hiding. They're scared. Ethan got in touch through a former colleague. At first she refused, but when she heard my name, and especially the symptoms, she went silent for a long time. Then she agreed to meet. Her only condition, no phones, no recordings, no names mentioned. We met at a public park near the bus terminal at dusk. Dr. Meredith wore a thick coat and a knit hat pulled low over her face, but her gray-blue eyes were piercing and alert. I can't stay long, she whispered, and nothing I say tonight ever gets traced back to me. I agreed to her terms. There were 27 children in the Phase 3 trial. The internal code name for the project was Helix 9. Kids between 2 and 5 years old, all with unstable neurogenetic potential. The company poured millions of dollars into the research, but when side effects started showing, they covered it up. What side effects? I asked, my voice tightening. Seizures, disorientation, memory loss, neural tissue degeneration. Even though the drug was initially advertised to regenerate synapses. A chill crept down my spine. And the other kids? 24 of them developed severe symptoms within 3 to 5 years. 2 died, 1 was sent overseas. Only 3 haven't shown full progression yet, and you're one of them. She paused, then pulled a small envelope from her coat pocket containing an old USB drive. This has everything I saved before I left. Internal reports, executive emails, tampered clinical reviews, and most importantly, the list of children and their current condition. If they're still alive. Why did you keep it? Ethan asked. Because I believed in it. Until they told me. To erase everything? She stood, adjusting her coat. They're not afraid of the law. They're afraid of the public. Then she walked away without looking back. That night, I sat alone with the USB in my hand. I didn't feel like a patient. I wasn't a discarded child anymore. I was the last one standing, ready to speak. Tomorrow, I would begin. Not just my recovery, but the journey to bring everything into the light. That morning, while practicing steady breathing in the common room, a loud knock pounded on the door. Camila answered, and within seconds, I heard her shouting in fury. I hobbled out. A man in a gray suit held up a strange badge. Another man in uniform stood beside him, stone-faced. Ethan Monroe was arrested this morning at a gas station 2 miles from here, the officer said. Charges: identity fraud and unauthorized access to federal medical records. He's my family, I said, my voice trembling with anger. He was just trying to fight for justice. You can explain that in court, the other man cut in. The holding order is valid for 72 hours. The door shut behind them. Camila turned to me, eyes red. They're trying to cut off your investigation. I stood there, paralyzed. No, I wouldn't let them extinguish this light again. 3 days later, Camila and I went to the Spokane County Courthouse to file for legal emancipation from my parents. With the diary, the drug contracts, and financial records Ethan had compiled before his arrest, our lawyer believed the petition would be granted at the hearing. But that wasn't enough for me. The world needed to see me, not as the sick girl who got abandoned, but as a living witness. Someone who survived and could speak. The press conference took place in a small auditorium at a local news station, attended by reporters, legal representatives, and several people who once donated to my childhood medical fund. I sat quietly backstage, gripping the hem of my dress. Camilla stood behind me, gently resting a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to prove anything to anyone anymore, she said softly. But if you're ready, go take back what's yours. The spotlight hit my face as I stepped up. Cameras turned with every step. The room held its breath. My name is Ava Monroe, I began, my voice shaky but firm. And I am a victim of an illegal drug trial disguised as a clinical study. I opened the folder before me, pulled out the contract my parents signed when I was just 3, and held it up to the cameras. They were paid $400,000 to enroll me in a trial using unapproved medication. For years, I believed I was being treated, but the truth is, I was an experiment. A reporter raised a hand. Do you have verifiable evidence? I nodded. We've collected everything. Medical records, my mother's handwritten journal, financial withdrawals from the charity fund, and names of the doctors involved. All of it will be turned over to the authorities. I paused, took a deep breath, and then I did something I never imagined I could. I slowly stood up, leaving the wheelchair behind. Some in the room stood in shock, cameras zoomed in, reporters murmured, but I remained upright. This, I said, hands trembling but eyes steady, is what they said I'd never do. They thought I was weak, but here I am, standing on my own to say this. I am not collateral damage. I am living proof. After the press conference, the image of me standing amid microphones made national headlines. The hashtag Justice for Eva spread quickly online. Messages poured in, emails, letters, stories from others who had also suffered in silence. 3 days later, Ethan was released. The charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. I met him in the police station parking lot. This time, I was the one helping him up from the bench. "I told you," I smiled. "We don't fall." 1 year after that day, the name Neurovance, formerly Nexivel, vanished from the American pharmaceutical market. The company declared bankruptcy following a full investigation by the Department of Justice. Multiple executives were indicted for unauthorized testing on minors, insurance fraud, destruction of medical evidence, and concealing dangerous side effects. The trial lasted 7 months. I couldn't attend every day, but I was there when the first verdict was read. When the head of clinical research walked out in prison scrubs, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt closure. And as for my parents? There's no prison for parents who sell their child for money. But the public doesn't need bars to deliver a verdict. National headlines called them the soulless Wells couple. The community fund that once helped pay for my medication was frozen. All credit linked to their names was terminated by the banks. Neighbors turned away. Friends disappeared. Even relatives cut ties. I didn't need to take them to court. They had already lost the last thing that could redeem them: honor and forgiveness. As they faded from public life, Ethan and I began rebuilding where everything had once collapsed. The wooden cabin he once called a temporary shelter became the headquarters of the Monroe Initiative for Medical Ethics and Survivor Support, shortened to the Monroe Foundation. We didn't start with much, just a few $1,000s from victim legal aid and a small stream of donations from strangers who wrote to us after my story aired. But trust has its own momentum. Within 6 months, we secured funding from a nonprofit that protects patient rights. A year later, we added 2 small cabins, one for legal counseling, the other as emergency housing for survivors. Camila led the recovery therapy team. With her medical background and military strength resilience, she became a steady pillar for those carrying both visible and invisible wounds. I handled case files and legal coordination. Some days I spent 8 hours straight reading letters. A mother coerced into signing an ambiguous consent form when her son was 3. A former medical volunteer in a Texas trial who backed out after spotting falsified data. A boy named Ryan, 12 years old, same condition I had, forced to try a drug developed by Neurovance. Ryan was the first person I truly mentored. He lived in a small town near Boise, Idaho. Single mother, no insurance, no clear diagnosis. He arrived late last summer with a backpack bigger than he was. Back then, I was still using a wheelchair. 7 months later, Ryan could stand unaided for 30 seconds. And me? I could walk the cabin trail with Ethan every morning. Light cane, a few breaks. The doctors called it a surprising improvement. To me, it felt like a piece of life returned. Today, a new wooden sign stands at the center's entrance. "You were never meant to survive, but you did." Below it, my name, not for praise, but as a reminder. Survival deserves recognition. I haven't forgiven everything. Maybe I never will. But I chose to move forward. That morning, most of the snow had melted. Camila stepped into the small office where I was filing Ryan's medical records. She placed a pale yellow envelope on the desk. Quietly, but her eyes gave something away. "The mailman said it's from a hospice facility in Montana," she said softly. "Sender's name is Mrs. Wells." I didn't pick it up, just stared at the messy handwriting in the upper left corner. Hauntingly familiar. It had been 3 years since anyone said that name out loud. That night, after everyone went to their rooms, I brought the letter out to the back porch, where Ethan had built a wooden chair for me last winter. I wrapped myself in a wool shawl, moonlight flickering through distant trees. Then I opened it. "Eva, you probably won't read this. You'll likely throw it away, just as I once threw away the right thing when you were little." But I still wanted to write. "The doctors say I have a few weeks, maybe days, and the last thing I want to do isn't to explain, it's to face it. You are the strongest person I've ever known. Stronger than me, stronger than your father. What we did was unforgivable, driven by greed, fear, and weakness. There's no excuse for turning a child into a test subject. I know that. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I only want you to know, everything you've become is not because of us, but in spite of us. I hope you no longer hate, but if you do, you have every right. Alan Wells. I folded the letter with care, like something fragile. Just a long exhale, like putting down a stone I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. I didn't reply. I didn't visit the hospice. But I didn't hold on to hate either. My forgiveness wasn't in words. It was in what I chose to keep doing every day. Spending the rest of my life making sure no other child would fall into the same spiral I once did. That night, I walked the narrow path into the woods behind the center. The lantern light from Camila's room cast a warm stripe. Farther off, I saw Ethan, waiting on the wooden bench by the fence. He turned as I approached and gently tapped the spot beside him. "You always walk around when you've got something big on your mind," he teased. I smiled and sat next to him. The night sky was unusually clear. Millions of stars flickered. Not just shining, but listening. I read my mother's letter, I said softly. Ethan didn't ask for details, he just nodded. We sat like that for a while. I looked up. Under that sky, I understood something. Life doesn't hand you justice, but you can build it for those who come after. And that's how my story ends. Not with triumph, but with continuity. From a small cabin in the forest, where a girl once couldn't take 3 steps, a new journey begins. Not just to live, but to build what's right. Eva's story isn't just about surviving betrayal. It's a powerful reminder that justice doesn't arrive on its own. It's made by those brave enough to rise from their pain. In real life, thousands suffer in silence under reckless medical systems. But, like Ava, every survivor has the power to become a voice for change. Through action, resilience, and compassion, they not only reclaim their lives, they pave the way for others. What do you think about Ava's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories about family, justice, and the will to live.